was a little girl who had a little curl right in the middle of her forehead. When she was good, she was very, very good. But when she was bad, she was horrid. Yes, when she was bad, she was horrid. But when she was bad, she was horrid.
They trade insults with Cordelia and have some nice chit-chat, but then Cordelia mentions the Master, and by implication, triggers Buffy. I like that they don't need to make a big show out of her being triggered, because we already know what's going on. Buffy goes too far and snaps off a mean comment as she heads off, and her friends are left stunned because they're not in her head and don't know what's going on. That night, at the Bronze, Willow finds Xander waiting anxiously for Buffy. Here we have the dynamic of the dream, where Willow pines for Xander and Xander pines for Buffy, fulfilling the prophecy in broad strokes, but without the entitled sexual flirting of Dream Xander. Possibly, Buffy could just shut him down, and that would be the end of it. Instead, Buffy runs into Angel. They have a repeat of him reaching out to her and her acting cold. This time, she decides to be bitter and mean by dancing sexily with Xander, trying to turn on Angel and make him angry, but messing with poor Xander's head in the process. The scene is atypical, might be for sex appeal as a season premiere hook, and is overtly a chance to promote the band playing the song.
Oh hey, did you guys hear that Chivo Amato's gonna be at the Bronze tonight?
Chivo Amato, they're playing?
It might be anti-feminist for her engaging in a sexual display for the benefit of two men, who could potentially serve the role as the vehicles for the audience, given that we don't understand Buffy's psychology very well. On the other hand, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is kind of a sexy show in general, and I personally don't have a problem with it. On the psychology front, this display illustrates multiple symptoms of PTSD, the general orneriness we've already seen, and hypersexuality. It's not uncommon for veterans to have strong sexual desires and appear to be sex addicts, and there's a good reason why it's a stereotype for young female victims of assault to display promiscuous behavior. Buffy represents an interesting blend of the two cultural concepts of a military hero and a high school girl. The show makes no attempt to say that she is specifically one or the other, and whether audiences read her as either is a reflection on them and how they perceive Buffy. To think badly of her as a high school girl being promiscuous is sexist, and to say that she deserves a break because she's been drafted into a supernatural war is also sexist for presuming that she wouldn't deserve respect otherwise. I think the only reason to dislike this scene is because of how mean she is to Angel and Xander, not her expressing her sexuality, which comes from sexist mores. Or perhaps, the biggest problem is the bitter competition sexual paradigm, in contrast to some of the more outlandish fanfics that would have everyone just be happy in an open polyamorous relationship. Unrealistic, sure, but we almost got it in Lost Girl.
Should we help her?
No, it's good for us. I mean her.
In addition to the explanation of trauma symptoms, the sexy dance has a vampiric appearance. It would be vampiric behavior for Buffy to suddenly become mean and sexual. That's kind of the vampire MO.
Well, yeah, that covers a lot of it.
It's in the same vein as Vampire Willow's dominatrix aesthetic, just to a lesser degree. Just saying. Cordelia confronts Buffy in the alley to tell her to knock it off. Though they're rivals, they're also kind of friends, and Cordelia senses something being wrong in parallel to Season 1, Episode 3 Witch, where Buffy was sensitive to Cordelia's distress. Cordelia acknowledges Buffy's distress, but says to do whatever she needs to do to cope, and then just deal. Buffy walks off, and Cordelia tries to make her jealous by suggesting that she dance with Angel as a tactic to bring her back. It's an interesting threat, making it more overtly clear that she and Buffy are doppelgangers, and it makes the dance scene less one-sided. Unfortunately, she and Jenny are then captured by vampires. Miss Observant doesn't notice, but she does visit the Master's grave and finds it empty. The next day at school, the Slayerettes hold an emergency meeting to discuss Buffy's behavior. The first of several somewhat underhanded conspiracies against her, when they find her behavior concerning. Willow calls her a bitch, but doesn't want to swear, so she spells it, B-I-T-C-H. Xander, presumably, pretends to mishear the letter H as the letter A, and calls her a bitka, thereby spawning a huge meme among Buffy fans. Feminists typically see the word bitch as a misogynistic slur that demeans women.
You stupid little bitch! Don't walk away from me, bitch!
Say goodnight, bitch.
This is the usage present here, and should probably be considered objectionable. However, a lot of feminists try to reclaim the slur and use it as a positive description for a strong woman who doesn't back down. Cordelia embodies the feminist concept of the bitch in this episode and others, and she explicitly identifies with the term in this context in Angel Season 1, Episode 5, Room with a View.
The bitch is back.
Likewise, a lot of Buffy fans describe themselves as bitkas, in the empowering sense of the word, to the degree that the word bitka might be synonymous with it. So while I don't like the use of the slur in When She Was Bad, the joke surrounding it does lead to a feminist usage.
I think we're all a little too old to be spelling things out.
A bitka?
Willow's first thought for why Buffy is acting like a bitka is that she is possessed, which is a logical conclusion following Season 1, Episode 6, The Pack. Xander is at first resistant because he wants to think that Buffy is into him, but admits that it's so unusual that it makes more sense that she is possessed. It's self-deprecating humor, but it does indicate a bit of maturity on his part. Giles questions what could have possessed her, and Xander proposes that when the Master bid her, there was a bad guy transference, and Willow agrees. This could simply be a theory that turns out to be mistaken, like the idea that the plot of Season 1, Episode 11, Out of Mind, Out of Sight, was about telekinesis and not invisibility, but when taken with events from Season 1 that would seem to point to this conclusion, I'm inclined to think that it was a previous plot from the first iteration of Season 2. Giles proposes the more mundane PTSD explanation just in time for Buffy to crash the meeting. She tells them about the Master and how the Anointed One is going to bring him back. Tensions rise and they start to fight, but disperse as Snyder approaches. Giles researches the resurrection ritual and determines that the vampires need the person closest to the Master, which Buffy assumes would be her.
Right. Assume and make you an ass out of me.
A vampire throws a rock into the room with Cordelia's bracelet and a note telling Buffy to come to the bronze. She goes to the bronze anyway. The others try to join her, but she says that it isn't their fight, that she is more effective without civilians to worry about, thus setting up the power of friendship message of the episode. Buffy is stronger with a support group, and her current attraction to the classic lone slayer model is wrong. She goes to the bronze alone, but Angel quietly joins her. From behind, not announcing his presence, just following her. It's creepy. In line with his vampiric nature, from back when they were trying to play that up, and it fits with the conception of the vampire as a rapist figure. One could imagine the same behavior from Count Dracula, stalking female victims. As the vampire has transitioned to a romantic figure, that stalking behavior became some kind of romantic gesture. It's easy to see how Twilight emerged from the same groundwork as Angel.
You know, being stalked isn't really a big turn-on for girls.
And that right there is what makes Buffy more feminist than Twilight. Sure, it has a similar vampire romanticism, but it doesn't let that override Buffy's agency. It presents Angel's behavior as a problem that he needs to fix. Does he fix it? He continues to have stalkery brooding in the shadows vibes throughout the show, but it's at least acknowledged as awkward and doesn't bring down the show's feminist themes. Angel tries to say that Buffy is stronger with friends, and she takes it entirely the wrong way and tries to goad him into a fight. She would prefer not to deal with the ambiguity of a vampire with a soul, and wants to force everything to be extremely simple. A lone slayer without friends fights a vampire because that's what slayers do. The fact that Angel doesn't want to play bothers her by forcing her to deal with a more complex reality, and the potential for emotional vulnerability, a theme we'll see more of in the future. Angel reminds her that she needs to save Cordelia, and reluctantly she returns to the mission. They go to the bronze, and find a vampire pretending to be Cordelia but no backup. Turns out, the word closest meant physical proximity, not intimacy, so the vampires actually need most of the people that Buffy was trying to keep safe by abandoning. With Buffy on the other side of town, vampires jump the others and easily overpower them. Xander wasn't in the library when the Master was killed, so they just beat him up instead of abducting him. Personally, I would kill him, but the Anointed One learned from the Master, and whatever he was a master of, strategy was not it. Xander chews her out for not standing by her friends, saying that they could have worked as a cohesive unit and were stopped just because Buffy was consumed by her own issues. Like Cordelia, he tells her to get over it, to stop making it a problem. In addition to a general power of friendship message, I believe this might be Joss making a point about Roseanne Barr not being a good team player. Joss used to be a writer on Roseanne, and he really hated the way Roseanne Barr treated the writers. He said that she allowed her psychological issues to lead to very unprofessional behavior, where she would unpredictably be either nice or mean, putting the whole writing staff on edge. In particular, he said that she had an opportunity to rally her forces and unite them for a feminist mission, and she instead threatened to fire them if they went to the press, which wasn't exactly the St. Crispin's Day speech. He appears to put this in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Season 5, Episode 22, The Gift, where Buffy has a chance to rally her forces, and instead threatens to kill them if they try to kill Dawn. To which Spike remarks,
Well, not exactly the St. Crispin's Day speech, was it?
it's possible that Xander calling out Buffy also represents what Joss would have said to Roseanne if he could. Then again, Xander threatens to kill Buffy if Buffy's irresponsibility leads to Willow's death, so maybe he's channeling Roseanne too. Killing seems to be the show equivalent for firing.
Oh, okay, he was fired. Oh no, I'm sorry, he was set on fire.
I don't think the threat is anti-feminist either, just mean. I think both of their actions can be summed up as hurt people, hurt people. Buffy investigates the only lead she has, the vampire used as bait. This interrogation goes the Jack Bauer route, cold-blooded torture, by her putting her cross in the vampire's mouth, which is the supernatural equivalent of Deadpool putting a hot cigarette lighter in a guy's mouth. This scene cements the half-vampire theory for me. It's similar to Vampire Willow and Vampire Xander torturing Angel. This scene is super scary, and most makes sense as setting up a villain arc.
Okay, let's talk about torture.
Something to keep in mind is that 1997 is before 9/11 and the extreme aggression to follow. The 1990s were a time of relative peace and prosperity, so no one had anger in their hearts the way is commonplace now. Torture was not something done by good guys. Jack Bauer was only possible because of extreme right-wing anger at terrorists for the events of 9/11, and the character was met with great controversy. But he unfortunately established a precedent for good guys to torture, so now even left-wing media casually depicts good guys torturing. In 1997, this wasn't casual. It wasn't how Buffy solves the problem. This was shock value. Even Angel and Xander, guys who hate vampires, react to that. Even with the shock value, I don't like this portrayal of torture as an effective interrogation tactic. It's not. It pisses prisoners off and gives them reason to lie or keep quiet. And trauma even distorts memories. So you can't trust anything anyone says under torture. Torture doesn't work. The only reason it makes sense for anyone to torture anyone is to be cruel.
How about a flail whipping? Would that take a nice long time?
Hours if you do it right.
To depict otherwise is irresponsible. These days, it's dangerous. And you can't even say that weird vampire psychology comes into play, because the show will later go on to depict its use on humans as effective. Buffy isn't just a bad girl in the sense of going outside the norms of society, something that you could easily tack feminist value onto. This scene depicts her doing something that's just bad, and people need to understand this. Fans shouldn't consider this a badass Buffy moment. At its best, it was setting up for a villain arc that never happened.
Well, I guess we're off to the old factory. I hate that place.
The vampire sends them to an abandoned factory that will serve as the main vampire set for Season 2. It's not quite as visually interesting as the underground church, but they can manage to light it better, so it's perfectly serviceable. The vampires have Giles, Willow, Cordelia, and Jenny Calendar strung up to bleed out onto the Master Skeleton for a satanic ritual. A very creepy image. Buffy plans to have Angel and Xander rescue them while Buffy distracts them, and here she actually does do something badass.
I'm gonna kill them all. That ought to distract them.
As the vampires prepare to have this dramatic ritual, she interrupts it with a great fight scene. Buffy works out her issues by fighting vampires. It's not a perfect cure, and it is a technique that Giles criticizes in Season 2, Episode 11, Ted, but it indicates that she's starting to make the effort to get better. Buffy faces off against an evil vampire priest named Absalom for a big boss fight, and she uses her teenage snark to disarm him when he makes his big taunt, subverting the cliché in a way that is feminist. Comparable to the "what was that? That was nothing" scene from Prophecy Girl. She uses her brains to defeat him with a torch.
Well, that's never happened before.
He drops a hammer, and she picks it up to smash the bones of the master, defeating him once and for all, in theory, and at the same time working out her issues.
You ground his bones to make your bread.
If Buffy were to simply smash the bones with cold anger, it would potentially be merely transplanting the mistaken ideas about what makes a strong male hero onto her, and wouldn't be that feminist. But that's not what happens. As she smashes them, she allows herself to cry, to show emotional vulnerability, and she lets Angel comfort her. They have a touching moment beside the bones of a vampire overlord, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. In the wrap-up, Buffy admits that her behavior was wrong, and, with Giles' encouragement, makes up with her friends and gets her life back on the right track. The power of friendship. Oh, and the Anointed One hates Buffy. Good. We hate you too, you creepy kid. While in retrospect, or seeing it the first time on DVD or syndication, people typically don't like the episode because Buffy's personality is so different. You know, she went away for the summer and came back as Captain Bummer. It was actually well received when it first came out, and kind of because of a false rumor. This was before Wikipedia, and you couldn't just look everything up about your favorite shows. And a lot of people didn't understand that there were only 12 episodes in Season 1 because it was a mid-season replacement for Savannah, and only had a half order of episodes. When it stopped after 12, people thought the show had been cancelled. When they found out the show was coming back in the fall, there was then a rumor that it was going to be retooled to conform to traditional gender roles. And everyone got a pleasant surprise that Buffy so overtly defied gender norms in her bad girl behavior. No one wanted a traditionally feminine and demure Buffy, and a number of critics actually praised the show for its apparent defiance of a presumed corporate pressure. Ironically, people nowadays are less impressed and more likely to complain that she isn't appealing enough. Without the priming of the idea of a sexist corporate pressure descending on the production to stop its feminist storytelling, people judge it purely as another episode of this entertaining series, and then determine it is less entertaining than other episodes, because Buffy doesn't behave as she does in the past, and stops the show's ensemble from functioning cohesively. When I was younger and saw the show for the first time on syndication, I was one of them. I thought Buffy was out of character as a Bitka, and wanted her to not be a Bitka, and I got what I wanted in other episodes, so I just dismissed When She Was Bad as a bad episode. Seeing the episode now, it's like a completely different plot. Even without the whole half-vampire theory, I interpret it completely differently. Sarah Michelle Gellar is a great drama actor and effectively conveys the complex emotions in her performance. I can believe her as a girl who went through extreme trauma and came out psychologically scarred. This story is about a warrior realistically suffering. It's notable as the last episode where we see Buffy's father, Hank, as a good guy, though he has an unseen presence in Season 2, Episode 22, Becoming Part 2. After Season 2, they decide to make him a stereotypical deadbeat dad who abandons his original family. But in When She Was Bad, he's a loving father who, over the summer in LA, spoiled Buffy rotten. This lends something to the depiction of Buffy's family as legitimate in its unusual form, and not broken per se, which is relevant in light of Joss's own experiences growing up with his mother, his biological father, and his stepfather. Families can look different from the nuclear model, and that deserves some adequate media representation. Joss himself is now divorced, and that has come along with some controversy. On August 20th, 2017, Joss's ex-wife, Kai Cole, posted an essay describing Joss as a liar and a cheat, someone who manipulated his female coworkers and employees, and who was never the great feminist he claimed to be, that he essentially is the lizard man beneath the mask. In response, Joss had a representative convey the message that she isn't accurately representing what happened, that she is misleading, but that he doesn't want to get into it for fear of dragging down his family. On the same day, he liked a tweet suggesting that popular opinion of any online rumor is based on whether or not they like the person involved, which seems to indicate a stance that the essay's veracity is mixed. It's an ugly mess that I'll try to stay out of as much as possible. Until this whole thing settles and an official story comes out, there's very little of it I can use to aid in analysis. I'll just stop trying to psychoanalyze Joss Whedon and focus on Buffy the Vampire Slayer as a collaborative feminist work by an excellent creative team. When She Was Bad is a good episode. It's depressing, but it's high-quality drama with plenty of respect for all of the characters. Even though Buffy acts like a bitka, we can respect why she does as a girl and a warrior with trauma, intentionally trying to push people away. The message about how it's a form of strength to show vulnerability and let your friends help you is great. Xander still has flaws, but he's developed past his entitled personality from Season 1. Even Cordelia, though poked fun at a bit for her shallowness, is given great respect as Buffy's doppelganger, who can hold her own in an insult fight. Though cheesy at times, it is a solid episode from both the entertainment and feminist perspectives. Please like, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and send me an email if you want to commission a video review, and click the link below to support me on Patreon. Thank you, and please check out my related videos.